Hey fellow YouTubers, my name is Josh and this is Josh Depp Reviews. This is a new channel where we're gonna review movies, games, and movie news. Today we're gonna talk about a little game called The Division, which is an open action RPG game where you take a character from level 1 to 30 in the desolate streets of New York City. Starting with the game, they give you the option to customize your character anywhere from hair color, eye color, gender, etc. Pretty basic, but in the end, you can try to match something that you can like and you basically settle on. Once you finish that, you'll go through a series of missions that will advance the storyline and also unlock portions of your home base where you can go anywhere from crafting to modifying weapon talents to increasing specific stats and re-rolling them. Now, in the end, you will advance, like I said before, to level 30. At this level, you get access to different types of missions and gameplay. For example, at level 30, you have access to the challenging missions. These challenging missions are basically the same missions you went through from 1 to 30, but at a higher difficulty. Not only the difficulty is increased, but also the gear. So you could potentially get 182 yellow gear, which normally you would have gotten 163, which is, when I'm saying these numbers, these are gear score values, which usually tells you the strength of the item. So the higher that number, the rarer the item is or the better the item is. But in some cases, you'll probably use lower gear scored items to match the stats that you like. Anyway, later on, you get access to Heroic, which was enabled from a previous free and part of the paid DLC, where you will get higher level gear, even though the mobs are not harder, but they're harder in the sense that they're more aggressive. So they'll have the same health and damage as a challenging mob, but they will throw themselves in your face just like the shotgunners do in the entire game. Anyway, after that, you also get access to the incursion, which requires you to do the final mission in the campaign or in the storyline. And incursion is basically you fight waves of mobs, and at the end you face a boss, or in between you face a boss, like in the newest incursion that they dropped recently. Anyway, in those incursions, gear is dictated by the level of the incursion. So if you do it in hard, you'll probably get 214 green pieces, gear set pieces, and weapons that match that gear value. Now, if you do it in challenging, you'll have access to 240 gear, and if you do it in heroic, you'll have access to 268 gear, 229 weapons, the like. On top of that, when you do these missions, you get something called Phoenix credits. These credits, you convert them to buy gear, to re-roll talents on your weapon mods, which was added in 1.3, and so on. Finally, in between all of that, and while you level, I believe at level 10 or so, you have access to the Dark Zone. So all through this time, you could have been hitting Dark Zone, and you could get gear appropriate to your level. Now, in my opinion, I would recommend you not do that and wait until you're level 30, because during those levels, you have various people who specifically hold tunes at specific levels so that they can basically gripe the hell out of the people who try to attempt the Dark Zone. Like some guy that I know personally, he attempted the Dark Zone at a lower level, under than 30. And he grouped up with a group, and all of a sudden they were about to extract, which is where whatever gear you get in the Dark Zone, you have to extract. You have to put it on a rope from a helicopter that you call. And now people can cut that rope and deny you from that loot and steal it. And on top of them being able to kill you and just steal it outright. So those guys boot him out from the group after he put it on the rope, cut the rope, took his gear, and killed him. That's a Dark Zone for you. So in general, the game is based on two sides, like most, um, RPG or MMO games. It's not an MMO, but it is an open world. It's a shared space. Once you join up in a party, you have the chance to be in the same server. More than likely, you are. If not, it'll transfer you so you are. Anyway, in the end, you'll have two camps, which is Dark Zone, which is a PvP open world, and then you have the PvE side where you could solo for the most part, give or take, and then you can group up with up to three other players, and you can do anywhere from incursions to heroic challenging missions, and you could get gear that way. Somewhere along the line, they introduced something called HVT, which is high value targets, where you can gather intel and basically unlock a boss in the playable PvE area, and you can kill that boss, and that boss will drop green items. Sometimes, too often, the gear set that you don't want, but we'll get to that in a little later. And they'll give you Phoenix credits and all that stuff, and basically you have dailies that you could do related to HVT, which grant you certain things, and then you could do the weeklies, which give you more powerful items. The bosses are more powerful, and you probably have to group up to face them, unless you're super OP and you have the highest level gear and you're the best player ever. Then you probably could solo it, and you could solo everything in the game, whatever. Anyway, the final thing that was added, which in terms of content, it was the underground. The underground is an entirely PvE area which is located under the base, which you open by doing, first by being level 30, and you do this little side mission where it helps unlock the underground. Once in the underground, you have a separate level or rank called the underground rank, which could go from 1 to 40. As you progress in the underground, you will unlock certain things in the underground, which will allow you to customize your underground mission even further. When I mean customized, is the underground itself, every mission is randomly generated based on the parameters that you put in place. So you could make an underground of a 2-session underground where you do one session and immediately it connects to another. It doesn't change the gear and all that in that sense, but it allows you to commit to a group. Let's say you to speak to a group and you say, okay, we're going to do 2 rounds. All right, so we set up the underground. Now we're going to do 2 rounds. Depending on the difficulty, it could take you anywhere from 15 minutes to 40 minutes or to none at all, where you fail the mission. Now, the biggest caveat in the underground, one is the gear drops. There's specific gear that drops there or that doesn't drop there. And 2, if you fail the mission, you get nothing. So a lot of times people tend to lower the requirements in terms of the directives. Just to break it down for you, the directives allow you to modify your mission in a sense of, for example, I'll give you now, is you could deny yourself the radar. Now, why would you do this to yourself? Well, the reason why you do the directives is to increase the gear that gets dropped. So if you want higher level gear, you want to put more directives. The more directives you put, the more guaranteed that you'll get 268, multiple 268s, and multiple 229s. These values, just a reminder, are the highest items that you could get in the game. So that's that. So right now, in terms of what the player base is waiting for, apart from fixes that need to happen, like yesterday, the next patch, which was recently announced by Ubisoft in the State of the Game, is 1.4. Initially, people were thinking that the expansion or the DLC was gonna drop next month in September, alongside Destiny, just to do a little competition there, but it's not. The 1.4 that they announced is not the DLC, and it will not drop in September, but in October, and it will not contain any new content. It will only contain bug fixes and any type of rebalancing that they see fit for the time being. That's what's announced. Now, this could change from here and now, but at the very moment, if you tune into the State of the Game for the Division for this week, right now the word is that they will not release content for 1.4. What does that tell us? That the survival DLC, which was stated to be a summer release, will probably get released after October, somewhere between November and December. And the final DLC will probably be next year. So there's that. Now, what do I think of the game? Now, I have two viewpoints on the game. One of them is my personal view, and one of them is a more general, objective viewpoint. I'm going to share the general viewpoint, and then I'll mention what I view personally that some people might agree with, some might not. In general, the game. If I would give a score to the game, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10. What does a 7 out of 10 mean? 7 out of 10 means that the game is not horrible. Some people might say it is horrible, other people might not. I may have said personally that the game is horrible in moments of anger, but in general, when I calm myself down and think about the game and what I've experienced, I think the game is probably a 7, maybe a 6.5 out of 6.5, 7, but if I round up, I would say it's a 7. And what does a 7 mean to me? A 7 is a game that you'll get your money's worth. 7 means a game that it's entertaining, to say the least. It has value to it. It's not a horrible game, it's not one of those games that you regret buying, though you may feel that way personally, but in general, most people are still playing the game for the most part. It's a game where the setting is familiar yet unique at the same time. In reality, this type of game hasn't been done before. If you really think about it, yes, there has been open world games. Yes, there has been cover to cover, quote unquote shooters, but not all at once, and not in the way that it was implemented. So where do the other 3 points are missing? Well, one is expectation. The expectation for this game was incredibly high. In E3, the things that were said and announced were incredible. One for one scale. They were talking about opening the entire block of Manhattan. They were talking about all this content. The way they portrayed Dark Zone was a little different. There were so many things out there that was mentioned, and it doesn't exist today. Still, right now, we're basically in Midtown Manhattan for the most part, and some sections are still missing. And right now, we have no indication or any clue as to when they will release the rest of Manhattan. Right now, the player base that actually plays the game consistently feels that they will not be able to release not even half of Manhattan. That's the expectation right now. Sure, they added one of the incursions, which is called Clear Sky, which happens in Columbus Circle, which, if you look at the map, it did open up all the way up to, if you know anything about Manhattan, it opened up to, I guess, Central Park, but this part of the game only exists within the incursion. It's not part of the open world. So there's that. Another thing people were expecting was a sort of evolution, if you will, of the game itself, in terms of what you did in the game, in terms of the story. When Underground dropped, people were expecting an area of Manhattan to be unlocked, not an underground section. So some people are gloomy about that as well, where you're basically in the subway in generic, randomly generated subways. This is not Manhattan. If you have taken a subway in Manhattan, none of this even looks remotely like Manhattan. So it kind of goes against the nature of the game. The nature of the game was to present a real a depiction of real life in Manhattan. There's specific buildings that are there's specific streets, but here you're underground. You have no sense of direction, of where you are specifically. Hell, the underground is not even on the main map. It's like in a separate instance. If you don't know what an instance is, it's basically another section of the game that's completely unconnected. So yes, you go downstairs, but once you activate the mission, you kind of teleport to a new area in, in the quote unquote train, but it's not connected to the rest of the game. So that's a problem, So those are the things that people are chiming in and all that stuff. Now, the other 2 points that are not that take away from of a 10 score for this game is the ongoing bugs. Right now, there's an ability that allows you to deploy a shield. You know, that thing still has bugs. It had bugs from day one, and it still are. It's not reliable. You have issues with skills that happen. You have issues where you're in the middle of an incursion and the skill doesn't activate even though you press it, and then people have to kill you. Your character has to die all the way dead for that skill to get restored. That's a big, huge problem. Another problem is gear itself, how the way in which gear drops, the rate in which it drops, duplicate gear pieces, gear with bad stats. These things. Sure, you don't want to be able to go to an incursion or a mission and get the gear immediately, and then you have nothing to do in the game. But you don't want to spend 10 hours farming the dark zone or farming the incursion and not get a single upgrade. That's not, in my opinion, acceptable. So those are the things that people are voicing now. Those are the things that you could experience yourself, that you don't have to have my viewpoint or anybody else's. You could experience this yourself, and trust me, you will experience this. Now, there's some people that are very lucky and they'll get every gear piece that they get, and that's a very small percentage of the player base. And congratulations to them. They have a different experience of the game. Sure, they're gonna love it, whatever. But at the end of the day, bugs need to get addressed. Content needs to get released in an expedient manner, and there's that. So overall, would I suggest you buy the game? I think the game is worth buying. The DLC, not so much. Right now, if you don't buy the DLC, you can still hit the Dark Zone and get the gear that you want. You could get the new set called Alpha Bridge. You could get 268 versions of the Sentry, which is still the best gear in the game, of Tactician, of Striker. All these are gear set names, etc. The one thing I want the most in the game, apart from anything else, is a gear manager. Yes, a gear manager. What's a gear manager? In the game, you get multiple sets of gear, and some of us store it in the stash and use the main set, and then maybe we want to switch to another gear piece. And to do this is such a task. If you don't have duplicate gear mods allow you to modify certain pieces of the gear. So let's say you have a chest piece. The chest piece will allow you, if it's a gear piece, a green piece, 214, 240, or 268, it allows you to insert a piece of gear mod. And this gear mod, what it does, it modifies your stats. It could give you anywhere from more health to more armor to higher firepower, etc. All these help you improve your stats. Now, I forgot to mention, in the game you have 3 stats, which is firearms, toughness, and skill power. These 3 basically are the foundation of your character, and your gear sets and gear mods and all that stuff modify those 3 stats and substats in between. So having that combination and trying to get out the gear and the stats that you want is very difficult, and a gear manager would allow you to cut your game time in half, because half the game you're just wrestling the beast, like a friend of mine would say, basically trying to get the stats. On top of that, sometimes the display doesn't show the appropriate stats that you actually have. You can remove the same gear and put it back, and you have different stats all of a sudden, and it fixes on its own. People log in, log out, or whatever, and they fix it. I'd like to thank everyone who joined me in watching my new video here. We will continue to release content from game reviews, movie reviews, news. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so you're gonna see videos on Star Wars, maybe even speculation videos on who the hell is Snoke, and if Rey is Luke's daughter whatever it is, it's going to be on here. Please join us, subscribe. I will soon have a Twitter and a Facebook account that you could follow, and I'll see you again. Take care.